So before we get in today's video, I want to go over the purpose of this modification. The second generation Toyota MR2 featured a steering ratio of about 3 1/4 to 1 lock to lock. The pinion that we're going to be installing into the SW20 comes from its later variant, the Toyota MR2 Spyder. The Toyota MR2 Spyder featured a steering ratio of about 2 3/4 to 1, and when installing this into the SW20, it makes the steering feel much more aggressive and sensitive, and overall improves the feel and general driving experience into the car. Due to the nature of the type of modification that's going to be completed in this video, I am not responsible for any modifications that you do to your car that are unsuccessful and damage your vehicle in any way, shape, or form. Since this is involving the steering system, you have to be extremely careful and double and triple check all of the components that you're dealing with in order to ensure that your vehicle still maintains its proper steering and is still safe to drive. Alright, so now we got all that stuff out of the way, let's go over to the bench and take a look at what we got going on there. Alright, so right here we have a parts list for a Toyota MR2 rack and pinion. The design of these things are pretty much identical for the majority of cars. You know, you got your rack, you got your pinion, you got a housing, you got some bushings, inner and outer tie rods, you know, hydraulic lines, pinion housing, some clips, bump stop, some nuts and hardware, and you know, that becomes a rack and pinion eventually functional for the car or wherever it came from. In this case, it's going to be a Toyota MR2. So my case is a little bit different compared to most, but I do want to show the process if you were converting to hydraulic and just swapping the pinion out, which is this guy right here. Now, what if you were just following along and you just wanted to upgrade the rack and pinion by just swapping the pinion itself, and you want to keep the original hydraulic power steering? I'm going to walk you through on how to do that super quick because it is super simple. So you're going to have some lines here. There's going to be a fitting there. You're going to take that off, take the two fittings off that are on the side on this guy, take the two 12mm bolts off on the top, pull that off. Once that's all complete, there's going to be a 24mm bolt right here. You're going to get out your fancy dancy impact gun or whatever tool that you want to use that your heart desires. Stick that on here. Take that nut off. Then you're going to hold this pinion with your hands. Crack that nut loose. It is a locking nut, so it has a little bit of the nylon fitting in there. Pull this out. Take your Spyder pinion. Reinstall. Reassemble as accordingly. If I were you, I'd put a little pipe dope on here just due to, you know, this does have fluid coming through it and there might be a small leak there. You just want to prevent any of that extra goop to come out of there, and then you're like, oh, why is my rack and pinion leaking? You know, could be an option. Do that. Put everything back into the car. Don't even touch any of the rest of the housing. You're done. You upgraded your rack and pinion. Now your steering ratio is going to be 2 3/4 rather than 3 1/2, give or take. And the car's just going to feel and steer 10 times better. So now that we got all the regular power steering rack and pinion stuff out of the way, let's go ahead and take a look at what you would do if you're converting to a manual rack and pinion. So right here is the MR2 Spyder pinion as showed previously, but as you can see right there at the end, it has been welded. Now, what's the point of welding this? There is a little bit of flex between this housing and this housing with this little press pin right here. And when there's under hydraulic fluid pressure, that allows it to flex ever so slightly. But once you get some fluid pressure in there, you know, all the PSIs and whatnot, there is no flex at that point. But since we are removing those fluid pressures, these will have a little bit of slack in them. I mean, it's nothing crazy. You could probably get away with just riding against the pin. But, you know, since I had a TIG welder and some time, I went ahead and welded these to make them a full solid assembly. Now, I'm not going to lie, I'm not the greatest TIG welder on the planet. I'm nowhere near that point. They aren't the prettiest, but they should suffice in this case because you're pretty much just holding these two together. Worst case scenario, you have that little press pin there. Okay, so the same part as I said before would all apply. You're going to take the housing off, which is this guy right here. You know, unbolt this bolt at the bottom of this thing, and you're all caught up to speed and you're at this point. So you essentially would be taking this guy out. This is your actual rack. This is long rod per se, and we're going to be cutting this off. Now, this is what actually isolates the two chambers when you have hydraulic power steering, and since we're going to a manual rack, he's got to go. There we go. Any more protection on my face and head, I might as well join the Brotherhood of Steel. Oh, crap. Done. Boom. Yeah. So, as you can see here, this is where they have these little snap rings that used to hold that in place that we forcefully removed because we don't need that anymore. And essentially what this thing did is isolate the two chambers, like I said earlier. And when you have hydraulic fluid pushing against it, it would either push, assist with this way or that way. But since we're going to manual rack, we don't need that guy no more. So now that's all set, we can go ahead and keep moving forward. Now the next thing I'm going to do is actually cut this line. I'm going to try to cut it as flush as I can because I don't have any mild steel filler wire. So what I plan on doing is when I TIG weld this, is to hopefully TIG weld it shut. So what I'm going to do now is take my TIG welder and run a small little bead across this, or just heat it up and melt it together. So this is basically just a sealed end, and then I can screw this into the rack and everything should not leak and it should look a little bit better. I would prefer not to cut those housings, so if God forbid I ever wanted to convert this back to a regular hydraulic power steering rack, I could. And this should just look a little bit neater than just having that line dangle around everywhere. Now that it's all welded up, go ahead and got those plugs installed, or whatever you want to call them. You know, beautiful welds. 10 out of 10. That's all good. Now we can move forward. We got to start greasing this thing. Okay, so this is the grease I'm going with. It's some Valvoline Extreme Red. You know, extreme maybe means it's better or not. I have no idea. Don't care. It's going to work just fine. And the plan is to get this tube in there. Now, how do I plan on doing that? Well, this is like a soda pop top. Just gonna pop that open a little bit like that to let a little air in. And I'm literally gonna take the tube and slide it over the top here like this. Now that the tube's in on the top, I'm gonna take this cap off. Like so. And I'm just going to take the cap and use it to push like a piston. All right, so we got this thing all filled up with the grease. I basically just took the tube like I was showing you earlier. I had to cut it off because my phone was telling me there's not enough storage left, unfortunately. And right here, right before I cut off here, put a little Permatex on the outside on this thing just to seal it up. I mean, it's not sealing a liquid, it's sealing a grease, so it really shouldn't be a big deal, but I just put it in there anyway to call it a day. There's a little dust boot that goes on top of this. I have that. I'll show you in a second. But this guy is completely filled. The next thing I need to purchase is just this little snap ring here, and then I got to get the dust boots for these guys. And then there's these little clips. They're called claw rings, if I'm not mistaken. Basically, if you have the tie rod right here, this is where you would put like a wrench or whatnot. This is clamped against it like that. And there's usually little spades that are on these things that stick on right there. So when you clamp it, it locks this in place and locks the tie rod in place. So there's pretty much nowhere for it to go. And it makes just things a hell of a lot safer that way. So there's no chance of that actually backing out, if that makes sense. And that's the reason why you have a lock nut on your end of your tie rod as well too. So it's the same kind of thing, it's just for the inside part. Tell you what though, that thing is looking freaking awesome. So unfortunately, I'm gonna have to call it at this point in this video. Now the plan was originally to get that rack and pinion installed into the car, take the old one out and pretty much junk it at that point, or send it into a shop to get rebuilt. But unfortunately, I'm waiting on a whole bunch of parts and I have no idea where they're at. So this is pretty much as far as I can take it. I'm missing the boots, I'm missing the inner outer tie rods, like I'm missing a lot of stuff. I did make a huge order for it, but I just don't know what the ETA is on the rest of that stuff actually getting here. So I wanted to get something out for you guys. In the meantime, I'm gonna call this a part 1. We'll make this as a 2 little part series video for you all, and then we'll get the rack and pinion taken out like I said earlier and put the new one in. So until the next time, guys, I really appreciate you all tuning in. Make sure you hit that like button and subscribe because it really helps the channel grow. My goal is by the end of the year to try to hit 1,000 subscribers. I'm almost halfway there, give or take. We're almost at 400, and for everybody who's subscribed, I really appreciate it. So once that's all said and done, I'll get that video out as soon as I can, and I get all the rest of the parts in for this guy. But until next time, guys, I really appreciate you all tuning in. I hope you have a good one, and take care.